that button now. And yeah, thanks for arriving promptly. My name is Damian Kastbauer. I'm the software product manager here at Audiokinetic, and super excited to drop in on the community here today and have a conversation about whys, about interactive audio, about education. There's just so much I feel like I would love to hear from folks about their experience wading into this rich career and uh, really intersection of creative technology and sound. So this is an open format to just have a conversation with the community. Thanks to Leonard and Jordan for having us here today in this experimental format. Um, I'd be interested right out of the gate, how many folks are, as they say, working from home right now? Like, is this, yeah, we've all kind of been doing it for the most part. So it feels like a long time since I've seen the game audio community. And so even with this screen-based lifestyle, I appreciate being able to uh, hang out with some folks. So thanks for coming today. Question also for folks. I'll put this one out there and feel free to, circle back at any time. You know, at Audiokinetic, one of the things that we put a lot of effort into are educational resources. And so if folks have maybe some good, some not so good, or some gaps in the education materials that we have, I'd be really interested if you want to share those along the way. So that's just kind of, I'm going to put a pin in that one. And at any time, there's a little hand button here in the Google Meet. You can feel free to raise your hand, you know, ask a question, have a comment. Like I said, this is meant to be a super informal and casual chat. So no worries there. So, all right. One coming in from the chat. I'm just jumping right onto it. Few times AAA studios want wise experience, but I've only worked on indie games that use Fmod, done the 101, so decently comfortable. Ways to show that you know how it works are good ways to practice when you're not actively working with it. So I think that from my standpoint, and that's a great question, thank you. It's really about that intersection of your tools and the game engine and sound. And so if you have a situation where a developer is asking for a specific tool set, having that understanding of how those pieces connect is probably the fundamental, right? And then which tool and how, is a little bit more of the streamlining the workflow, or having a clarity of understanding, or being able to reach your destination, or whatever it is you're trying to express with the game and sound as quickly as possible. And so from my standpoint, it's kind of how do you express the fundamental? Like, I understand that from an implementation standpoint, that these are the connections. But then whether it's Fmod wise or otherwise, how do you communicate that knowledge? Well, and I guess maybe the other question, and I'll ask Leonard as well. It's like, do do tools, like what's the significance of tools in comparison to that baseline of understanding? Uh, what do you think?
Well, as far as practicing, I typically direct people towards the 101, 201, and then if they're really up for some C sharp stuff, then the Wise 301. The Wise 251 is a little bit more specific, so I typically have people skip that one unless they're looking specifically at sort of optimization. And then, yeah, to answer your question as far as like tools, I would say that similar, I don't know, I just sort of draw like a direct parallel to a DAW, where you have a certain way of working and certain tools, they have a certain sort of idiomatic, like a way that they like to work. And hopefully that lines up with the way that you like to work. And so, yeah, there's definitely, sort of stylistic differences between, say, like Fmod and Wise. But sort of similar to like learning languages, I would say that it's good to learn more than one because then you get like a reference point, and not just know one, but then you also have a contrasting view to sort of see like, oh, maybe there's not just one way of doing things. And I found that that's helpful for students, especially ones that are going into like AAA studios that have sort of bespoke tool chains, because that's a lot of what they end up doing right at the beginning is trying to figure out how to learn that particular system. And I can't train them on that system because I don't legally have access to it.
Yeah.
I do have a general idea of, what some of the larger studios do. Obviously EA has shown like their Frostbite, Rockstar has shown AMP, and, I guess Gorilla also has like their own tool chain as well. So yeah, I would say that the tools do inform what you do, but similar to a DAW, it's good to sort of have some chops in different modes of working.
I'll riff off that too, because like uh, the companies you mentioned with their own tools and ways of creating audio interactively, like no one is expecting someone to show up at the door and have experience with a proprietary tool they can't access, right? And so it's about that baseline understanding. It's about those fundamentals. And so yeah, I feel the same way where having that understanding across different ways that tools deal with things, that's really the value and that flexibility of understanding. I'll take the second part of your question, Ariel, you know, good ways to show that. And I guess, you can, there's a great YouTube playlist from the School of Video Game Audio that has all kinds of great examples of illustrating those implementation techniques across different tools. And it's a constant question of how to show the technical side of the sound, you know, puzzle, as it were, for games. And some great examples in that playlist again. So, uh, and then like, so you mentioned indie games as well, and it's like the collaborative experience, like how do you express that? Because a lot of times working with a larger studio, I think one of the fundamentals there, reading between the lines, is that collaborative aspect of working as maybe a specialist on a larger team. And so your ability to work within like a large project, uh, and yeah, I guess how do we illustrate our compatibility or willingness to to grow alongside a project as it's in development. It's an interesting one. Anyone else have thoughts on it?
Um, I'll jump in. Sure. I would, uh, if I was specifically looking to demonstrate a specific tool, like say I wanted to show employers that I could use Wise, I would just pick a demo project. I would probably try to do two things at once, which is maybe too much, but I would say like either Unreal Wise or Unity Wise at the same time, and do a demo reel that showed some stuff that I did with implementation, and just that I sort of know what I'm doing with Wise. And like Damien said, there's a lot of examples on the School of Video Game Audio's YouTube channel. But yeah, I would just take some time to do a project, and it doesn't need to be a full game at all, but just maybe like a section where you can show, not only that you can implement sounds, but you can like have things in the game change parameters, and maybe some implementation stuff in the engine too. Like you can do a thing in Unity that's cool. You modified some code or something, and that's what I would do to show this sort of thing. Um, but curious to hear what other folks think as well.
Yeah, just to kind of riff off of that. So of course, great advice with like putting together a demo reel, showcasing how you understand Wise. More recently, I've been interviewing with a couple of AAA studios, and I can't really say exactly what they asked of me, but one of the interview questions was, how would you put together X or Y system? And I wanted to get back to them really quickly, and I didn't really have enough time because I'm on Eastern Standard Time. The interview was at like 3 p.m. my time, and I want to get back to them by the end of the day. So I put together really quickly a Google Slides presentation, just showing some screenshots inside of Wise and explaining, hey, I would start by making this RTPC, and I would follow, this naming convention. I would modify things using switches attached to the RTPCs so that it would be one single event versus creating a bunch of events, and just kind of really quickly putting together an 8 or 9 slide presentation that showed I understood Wise. And they emailed me back right away and said how much they appreciated that, and how that kind of made me stand out among their candidates. So I think maybe that's another way that you could showcase your understanding.
Excellent insight. Thanks for that. It reminds me of very early on, middleware tools in my career, not super accessible. I got a hold of this wild one called Creative Labs ISACT. This was they made me sign an NDA. It was like super weird and obscure, but sorry, I built a cow in it. I built a cow, like randomized breathing, occasional tail swish, kind of chewing sounds intermittently, and this was just what I was doing for fun with this tool that I was exploring and trying to understand. And well, yeah, I'll put a link up to it later. I have a video capture of it, but it makes me think of your slides illustration, right? It's like, okay, and this was just for me for fun. I appreciate the directness of your communication technique, but if you have something that you're passionate about, or a specific area of interactivity that is, well, your thing, or that you love, go deep on it. Try to build out that system with as much detail. And whether it's some amazing ambient system that has non-repeating one shots and a static bed, or positional elements in a world, like how deep can you go with a system to illustrate maybe not only your sound curation and how you choose the sounds for that system, but also that how deep into the simulation can you go on the system side.
Yeah, and that's something that's really helpful with the, well, all the different Wise, courses, is that you've got access to, AK Cube, which is basically sort of like an old style first person shootery dungeony type thing. But then you've also got the Wise Adventure game, which is actually quite detailed. And so if you do know those two projects and you're able to draft stuff within there, that's very helpful. And also, as far as what Anthony was saying, as far as that is a very typical thing where with the school, I try to help people out with their demo reel and have like a base knowledge, but I can't directly help with the sound test. So the idea is to have a fair amount of fluency, and we do really try to help the students as much as possible with that, so that you can take an idea and then be able to realize it either in sort of like a design format like you did, or in an actual sort of like implemented format where you're submitting something. Another thing that I heard recently from a larger studio is that what they do really like is that if they give any sort of feedback, that you can synthesize that feedback and actually give another version quite quickly. So that's a huge, sort of thing as well, is that it's one thing to sort of think you know what you're doing, but it's another thing to really be able to collaborate and take other people's input and be able to turn something around fairly quickly, on that as well. Yeah, and I guess we can look for more questions too I guess we can put that in the chat if people have more questions. Feel free to fill it up.
Yeah. I'll just jump off what you were saying and tie it back to this collaboration, right? And I think so much of our industry is founded on that ability to give and receive feedback, to work collaboratively across disciplines, right? Especially. Maybe I'll put one more wild thing there is vocabulary, like language, like like how do you talk to animators, how do you talk to programmers, like in the same way that we throw around things like sample rate or frequency response or other audio centric terms, what does it mean to have IK on an animation, or what does it mean to call a function? These are the kind of, keywords that give you access to, I would say, a deeper level of collaboration across the team. So vocabulary, and as Leonard has said, like the certifications do attempt to bring you into that world of vocabulary from an interactive standpoint. Interesting if folks have found any resources that maybe for other disciplines or even for audio as they're wading into this, any resources that they think have been very helpful. Or other questions, be sure to drop them in for sure.
Okay. There is one question that I have as far as, how do you say, a slightly selfish question. With keeping the Audiokinetic educational material in sync, I know that it does take time, like a lag time, to figure out, successive versions of like the release of the Wise Adventure game and whatnot. But I have found that that's a consistent stumbling spot with students where they're like, okay, I'm using the most recent version of Wise, and then they go to use like the Wise Adventure game, and they're just like, wait, nothing works, and like my sound banks don't work, and I can't connect. And so I know that it's shown on the launcher, and I try to make it fairly obvious in the course. For the demo reel, Basically, this school has done a custom, integration with Wise using the 3D game kit, both with Wise and with Fmod. And so I always have the most recent one with Wise or with Fmod, because for me it's fairly easy to update it. I don't have to update all the educational materials in sync, because I don't need to certify people at this point. And there's no grades with the school either. So I guess that's kind of a question that's slightly offhanded, like what might be a good approach to keep students and also the people, folks that are listening here, sort of, so that it's, if they're going to use the Wise adventure game, so that they're using like the correct version, building the sound banks in the correct spot and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely something we have heard and have some focus on. And what we try to do is we try to make explicit the association between our materials and the versions, right? And so, yeah, it's a effort to maintain that across updates. So something that we're working to continue to improve. Your experience is well heard, though. So in the short term, I would say, like, messaging the explicit connection between certifications, documentation, and the versioning. And in the long term, we're listening and trying to find the right way forward to do that. Because yeah, it's a bit of a disconnect between all the cool things that come out and the new hotness. Like, we're prepping actually the next version of the Wise Adventure game to be released with 22.1 later this year, which will bring in, many of the new features from Wise 22.1, as part of that Wise Adventure Game showcase and sample project. And so we want people to have access to that in that environment as soon as possible, right? So that feels good, right? Because we're polishing up curves, and reflect is super cool, and we got that new 3D audio thing with object-based routing wired in, so folks can audition 3D audio in their Windows workspace using the Windows spatial sound system, and toggle it on and off in the Wise Adventure game to hear how it adds and contributes to immersion. And so we want to bring all that stuff out in parity with these new versions, so that folks can get their ears and hands on it as soon as possible. And yet, as you're underlining, there's going to be a disconnect between that and the piles of certification material that has been meticulously crafted to help focus people in their educational journey, right? But it's good to hear from you about the value of keeping that up to date. So.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see all the new stuff, the new hotness, and try that business out. And yeah, as Paul said, that there are videos and there are many different things that show which version to use, but it's just the way that it's currently, that students typically fall between things. Like, there's the current version of Wise, there's the version of Wise that you use for WAG, the Wise Adventure game, and then you also have a different version for certification. And we're very used to, working with multiple repos or branches, but for students just starting out, they often are just like, well, I'm using Wise, but where's the save button? Like how do I save as? And it's this thing that we don't necessarily support that in school, because I'm not you know, I don't want to have to put a repro together or to support a whole bunch of students on different machines all around the globe. So it is something that we don't happen to support, but I'm just saying that, yeah, like similarly, you know, we're trying to work with Audiokinetic and the existing system to try to make it as easy as possible for students. And then, like you're saying with the communication thing, is that that's something that I do a lot with students that are interested, is that, you know, we have a text system and we just, you know, basically message back and forth, really similar to the way that you would be working with the game audio coder on a team primarily. Like, I don't do like the graphics, the art and stuff, but that's something that we do try to support in the course, is that, like, if people really want to get creative with it, then they can ask me anything. I've done this for a while, so I can answer most questions, even the graphics ones at this point. I've gotten, you know, like during Noisevember, I actually did a sort of woodshedding session to learn more about how graphics and shaders work, like in Unreal and in Unity. So, yeah, and there was a question asking about more details about the new hotness, so maybe Damien can hear some more.
Oh, new features. Yeah. Well, I could talk you through some of them here. And I'm happy to go into presentation mode. There's also on the Audiokinetic YouTube channel, a deep dive into the currently available WISE 22.1 public preview, which details at length. I had some coworkers join in. We went hands-on with some of the new features. And so you're welcome to explore that at your leisure as well. And we could talk more about it too. Here's the thing I wanted to riff on that Leonard was saying as well, and that is this first user experience. Like, we've got a bunch of folks here who might be taking their first steps with WISE, or maybe you recently did if you've been participating with the School of Video Game Audio. And I'm interested if folks have had some other experiences taking those first steps that they would bring to the conversation, because it's something that we are focusing on, trying to understand, you know, where people are either, you know, having a hard time jumping over invisible walls or breaking through them, connecting the dots. Like, where are the gaps in your exploration of WISE as a first-time user? And where could we be doing a better job to help people along that path? So I wonder if anyone has had recent experiences. And again, similar to what Leonard had said about, you know, versioning. Are there other things that that folks have experienced? And again, feel free to raise your hand down here in this magic tray if you'd like to speak up, or drop it into the chat, whatever feels good. I'll take a side while you're thinking about it. Other new features. So in 21.1, we rerouted the pipeline to be able to support audio objects and this new burgeoning 3D audio format is what I would call it. And audio objects, the biggest draw being the ability to increase the level of precision with the positioning of a sound in conjunction with where it is perceived. Oftentimes using a headphone-based binaural processor. Okay, and we opened up the pipeline to be able to deliver this new rich format of audio objects, a channel-based spatial bed, and also a non-filtered pass-through mix to an endpoint, which is one of those vocabulary words. But essentially, we can deliver this rich sound information all the way to let's say your Windows desktop, where you have available the Windows spatial sound system that you can toggle on and off. You right click that little speaker icon in the bottom right, and you get the Windows Sonic platform that you can enable. And when you do that in a headphone-based delivery, you are essentially getting a higher level of fidelity because of the way that we are now routing sounds or enabling the routing of sounds. And so when we talk about new features, like, this is huge. And you take a look at 3D audio on the PS5, games like Dark Souls or Returnal, most of the games these days, Horizon, great sounding games leveraging this technology that, again, you can audition today, not only on platforms, but also in your workflow. And I think that's a game changer today, being able to, flip the switch back and forth. And that's something one of our other sample projects, the Wise Audio Lab, that uses Wise and Unreal. Last year, our update rerouted and enabled that kind of functionality. Actually, the campfire that we're seeing here is directly from that. And that campfire was implemented using this format. And what you'll get is you'll get a base layer of rumbling delivered to the pass-through mix with no filtering. It's positioned, it does all the right things, from a distance, but it doesn't get binaurally processed when you have 3D audio enabled. The next layer is this kind of sizzling, crackling layer, right? And we're chopping up the loop and shifting it a little bit here and there, but essentially we're allowing that to be delivered to the main mix, or that spatialized bed, in whatever format your system decides. So Microsoft Windows Spatial Sound by default will initialize at a 714 channel configuration. Okay, I'm using big words now, but what's exciting is that that it will take that middle layer, that sizzly, crackly part of the campfire, right? And it will virtualize it into a 714 configuration in your headphones and binaurally process it, okay? And then the last piece of that campfire is the sparks and pops, and those are all using automation from emitter position in Wise. And so randomizing, how fast and how far they fly, and giving them each their own unique sound. And with that, allowing them to flow all the way to the endpoint as audio objects with their own position. And so now what happens with each of those pops and crackles that are being, pathed in Wise, is they're able to be rendered by that binaural processing in the Windows Spatial Sound environment with the greatest spatial positioning. And at any minute, you can toggle that on and off in Windows. You can change configurations in Wise to hear that. You can do it from the Unreal menu in the Wise Audio Lab. And I think this is that intersection right now of being able to learn by doing with your hands in the environment and audition this this new format. And so that's part of what we released in Wise 21.1. I know I'm kind of throwing it back to the last version and not talking as much about 22.1, but I think that's a really exciting new feature. Some good questions coming up in the chat too as I'm talking. Has anyone tried 3D audio in Wise 21.1, or even jumped into the Wise Audio Lab, I'd be interested to hear from folks if they have.
I have not used the system that you're describing, I don't think, but we are using Wise Spatial Audio in our game. So, which is slightly older, I believe. But so we're using like the AK room based
Yeah.
spatial audio, and then also using certain objects are on a layer in Unity that is has obstruction properties, but it's
Yeah.
not to the level of that you're describing with like automated audio objects for each spark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Haven't experimented with that yet.
Cool. And again, I think you're doing a great job here, showing other sides of the coin. And again, back to vocabulary, not to like drill down on it, but like spatial audio, spatialized audio, 3D audio, like binaural audio. Like this is just a short subsect of terminology that, all has a sort of overlapping thing. And so when you talk about spatial audio and Wise, we're talking about, defining rooms and portals. So, places where sound propagates from a room using, spatial audio, environmental concepts, right? And then maybe I'll jump to the question here in the chat. The question of, is the codec only able to decode the object-based audio to binaural, or are there other systems like Atmos or Surround available? So, great question. Thank you for that. It's not a codec. Wise kind of dynamically reconfigures itself based on the settings that are initialized over in an endpoint. So whether your endpoint is, let's say, a Windows PC, a PlayStation or Xbox Series X, or any of the other platforms like Switch or any other. So those systems all have this idea of what format they want to receive from Wise. And so what we do is Wise just kind of dynamically reconfigures itself to deliver the best audio based on what that platform wants. And so taking the next step into the question, things like Dolby Atmos has it has a few different ways that you can think about it. It can similarly work in the Windows spatial sound environment. So you can actually get a Dolby Atmos headphones plugin for that environment on your Windows PC. This is available over on the Xbox as well. And it can receive this rich stream of information. And one thing we could talk about is, we briefly mentioned channel configuration. So 714 being an Atmos standard channel configuration. And then within that, you have audio objects, and the audio objects have different limits based on the renderers. So Atmos has, in the Atmos for headphones plugin in the Windows Spatial Sound, has 16 objects available, whereas Windows Sonic in that same environment has 128 objects that it can process or take in, position dynamically, and render using that binaural process. And so I think I might have answered the question. A little bit of verbosity there, but this is all just language, right? And we're all just trying to find our way through it. So I would encourage folks out there who are like, WTF, this whole thing, put your ears on it, put your hands on it, understand what the values and benefits are, because there really is a difference, and it's really in the hearing that you begin to understand the value. So otherwise, it's just a bunch of words. So I hope that during your exploration in interactive audio, you can yeah, listen for yourself. So I will jump back to a question from Aaron about WAPI and WACL. Anyone want to unpack those acronyms? The WAPI is the Wise Authoring API, and WACL is the Wise Authoring Query Language. And these are two ways that people can work with information from the WISE project in order to either understand what is in their project by querying and digging into the pieces of it, as well as a way of, I think a lot of folks are using it to streamline their workflows. So the WISE Authoring API gives you the ability to, in conjunction with WACL, read into your project, understand parts of it, and then build things from that understanding. And so an example might be that you read into your project, find all of the sound SFX named a certain thing, and put them into different containers in your system as part of a process. So huge scripting capability to be able to very quickly execute on workflows and systems. And so that was the short explanation. And then the answer is, yeah, we have some good blog posts that outline different uses for WAPI and WACL. We also have a great Wise Up on Air hands-on. So this is a live streaming series that we do at Audiokinetic on the regular. We got two flavors, a developer-focused flavor where folks using Wise in games will talk about their projects and the games that they've worked on, oftentimes lifting the hood on Wise and taking people through a step-by-step, as well as the Wise Up on Air hands-on variety, which takes you hands-on with developers at Audiokinetic behind the features. And Bernard Rodrigue does a great job of digging into WAPI, and I know that we will be hearing more from him in the future about it as well. So and part of this is, I know Leonard does a great job of providing this ability to, wade into scripting as part of the School of Video Game Audio. And WAPI and WACL are continue to evolve towards greater and greater accessibility, and yeah, there might come a day when that finds its way into coursework. So
Yeah, I guess I have follow-up questions. So this might be for Bernard, I guess, but I'm curious with WAPI, could you say use it to do like a real-time, like on-screen profiler? Or Damien, if you know the answer too. Is it something that's possible?
Hello.
There we go.
hey, Bernard.
Hi. So you mean having on-screen profiling data in the game, or
Yeah.
yeah. So that would be more of something else. I think we added maybe 1 year ago an API directly in the game that the game can register for callbacks to receive profiling information, such as the CPU, the voices, a lot of things that is already available in Wise, you can get it directly in the game, and the game can process it and display it directly. So that's not WAPI, but it's similar stuff.
There's an example of that in the Wise Audio Lab as well. We have a debug meter that you can pop, and so that might be a place to look for that example. Bernard, do you want to give a couple more examples maybe around the use of WAPI and maybe ways that you've seen folks leverage it?
Yeah, sure. So we have been, okay, I was, this morning I was working on a future presentation, and I found this presentation I did 5 years ago, and I have it on my screen, so maybe I can share.
Please.
Yeah. Give me a second.
And this is the kind of fun we like to have. You ask, and here we go. Let's talk about WAPI.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, these are just a cloud of different example. So this slide is more about integrations and how we could connect Wise with other tools in the ecosystem. So like the game engine example, where in our own Unity and Unreal integrations, we're actually using WAPI to communicate with Wise, to retrieve events, but we could also create new events directly from the game engine if it's needed. What we do already with Unity and Unreal, we build sound banks, but we could also import WAV files. So eventually someone could like drag a WAV file directly into Unity, and it would create the sound for you, create the event for you. You could go as far as that. Playback. Then we have different wave management database, like SoundMiner and Basshead, I think.
Yep.
They have integration with Wise using WAPI, so we can import wave files to Wise. And we have seen some of our customers having a database of wave files for their dialogues. So every dialogue lines from the game would be in the database, and the database would manage the different languages. So this would sync with Wise using WAPI to create the sounds and event needed. We have seen text-to-speech examples, and automation also is a big usage of Wise. For example, creating new object sound banks, and here at AK also we use it internally for our automation test suite. So we have a lot of automated tests running every day using WAPI, just for coverage, end-to-end testing, and also unit testing. And yeah, we talked about profiling. So profiling you could, for example, dig into a profiling session, build a report, table, work with HTML, and we have seen other types of integrations, simulations, new editors for accessing and changing the data in Wise. So a lot of things you can do with that. You just need to understand a bit how it works and have a bit of programming knowledge, and then you can go far with it.
Yeah, the question from Aaron, which is similar for me, is like, so this is part of the SDK. We just sort of dig into that, and we can do basically real-time on-screen profiling, say like, like a list of currently playing events or something like that, or, locations of the events that are playing, like overlaid on-screen, like a debug kind of idea.
I have trouble to understand. There's a audio glitch coming from you. Leonard, can you repeat the question?
Better? I guess it's sort of coming in and out. Sorry about that. So I'll try and speak through the static. And so, yeah, I think what's happening is my machine's getting warm here. It's part of the reason for me not wearing a hat. It's actually quite warm in Vancouver, oddly enough. So, the main question was, is it part of the SDK, this way that it allows us to do real-time profiling while the game is running and not using the tool?
Yes, you could do that, but that would be so. WAPI is accessing wise authoring information. So if you want to use WAPI to for profiling purpose, you would need first to connect wise authoring to your game, and then make this WAPI app that would connect to wise authoring and retrieve the profiling information from wise authoring, not directly from the game, but through wise authoring. And so we already exposed a couple of profiling functions to wise authoring, such as you have access to the voice information, also the objects, 3D objects information that Damien was referring earlier in this presentation, 3D audio objects, and also some other information from the profiler. But the full information from profiler is also accessible directly from the game using the custom API we referred earlier.
Yeah, and again, I would say, there's two sides to this conversation. One is the debug information from Wise Runtime on screen in the game. It's one side of it. And the other side is the Wise Authoring API and Wise Authoring query language that gives you access to the project understanding and then streamlining processes around that and around the authoring pipeline, if you will. And I guess the last thing I would show is I do have this screenshot of the update to the Wise Audio Lab that we did in 21.1, so last fall. The current version of the Wise Audio Lab that does have debug metering that shows the different mix categories that I was describing across the pass-through main mix and audio objects. So for an example of that, you can go right to that Wise Audio Lab. We distribute both the Wise project and the Unreal project source, and so you can jump in and dissect away. Cool. We're coming up on the lightning round of this Wise community discussion. I want to honor folks' time today and appreciate and value having folks here. Any burning questions? Again, feel free to raise your hand using this magical hand raising button or type it in the chat. And we've got Bernard. Like Bernard is the experience team lead, a senior developer at Audiokinetic. Definitely at the center of the 22.1 editing workflow. So if folks have jumped into the new public preview, or if you will, the editing workflow is something that Bernard and his team have been working hard to deliver for everyone out there who will use Wise. So we're really interested in feedback from folks about it because we want to grow it in the direction of how you use Wise. But yeah, Bernard, anything else you wanted to say about the editing workflow while we have you?
It's time to try it. If you have any comment, if you feel any problem with it with your work with your workflow, it's time to raise a hand and tell us. We still have time to fix stuff before the release, and we'd be happy to hear about it.
Yeah, so exactly. And with that, I would say, again, we've opened up the ability to jump into the public preview. You can get it right through the Wise launcher today, in advance of the full release. Don't ship your game with it, but definitely put your hands on it. We have these different feedback channels for you to drop us a line once you've had some time with it. Report a bug, engage with the community Q&A, contact support if your project is in a place where you need support. Take the survey. We put a survey in right there with the version, and we're asking you a few pointed questions about the new features in 22.1, or just send an old-fashioned email, pigeon, or a letter in the mail, whatever it takes to get that feedback to us, because we're here today, and certainly we're here every day to hear from the community, your experience, and continue to grow Wise in the direction of how you use it. So that was my last spiel on that. And again, thanks for your questions and insights today, especially on the education side, as you continue to wade into this world of interactive audio. Be very interested for your experience as a first-time user of Wise, if it is your first time. Again, trying to find those gaps where we could help connect the dots, break down those invisible walls, and get you to the fun part of this interactive audio art form. And thanks to the School of Video Game Audio for doing such a good job lending a hand to you in that process.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm sure my audio is all crackly, but I'll also say if you wish to see more about the school, it is at sobga.com. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I appreciate it. And I am very sorry to be Mr. Ringmod today. I think I reset my audio I/O and it wants to run at 44.1, so apologies for that. But thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool. And there we go.